Petchenegs and Kipchaks. The Empire of the Steppes. By René Grousset. The Petchenegs, the Patsanakatai of Constantine Porphyrogenitus and Ishtharchres Bachanak, were, as we have seen, a Turkic tribe which, according to Marquardt, had once formed part of the Confederation of Western Tujue but had been driven back toward the lower Sirdarya and the Aral Sea by the Karluk Turks. Pursuing their westward migration, they were grazing their herds between the Ural, Yaik, and Volga, Ityl, rivers when, around 913, according to Constantine Porphyrogenitus, they were driven from the region by a combined attack of Khazars and Ogurs. Farther west, the Petchenegs had occupied Lavidia, north of the Sea of Azov, having wrested it from the Magyars. Shortly afterward, the Petchenegs, resuming their westward drive, expelled the Magyars from Atalkuzu, that is to say, the western part of the Russian steppe, between the Dnieper and the lower Danube. Thus about 900 the Petchenegs utilized the pastures between the mouth of the Dnieper and that of the Danube. In 934 they joined in the Hungarian invasion of the Byzantine Empire in Thrace. In 944 they were with Prince Igor on his descent upon Byzantium itself. In 1026 they crossed the Danube, but were repulsed by the able Constantine Diogenes. In 1036 the Russian Prince Yaroslav of Kiev inflicted upon them a bloody defeat which put an end to their dominion over the steppe, and forced them to aim once more at the Byzantine Empire. In 1051, under the impetus of their own ambitions and in reaction to the drive of the Ogurs, they again invaded the empire. There was a further incursion in 1064, across Thrace to the gates of Constantinople. The drama for Byzantium lay in the fact that, when it recruited mercenaries from among the pagan Turks of Europe to fight the Muslim Turks of Asia, the sense of Turkish kinship of the pagans was often stronger than their loyalty to the basileus. This was seen in 1071, on the eve of the Battle of Malazgirt, when the Petcheneg corps deserted the service of Emperor Romanus Diogenes for that of Sultan Alp Arslan. In 1087 in Europe, during the reign of Alexius Comnenus, the Petchenegs once more invaded Thrace as far as Kouli, between Ennis and Constantinople, where at last they were put to flight, leaving their leader Tselgu on the battlefield. Alexius Comnenus made the mistake of pursuing them, and was beaten at Dristra, Durostorum, Silistra, in the autumn of 1087. The empire was saved by the arrival of another Turkic horde, the Kipchaks or Polovtsi, who emerged from the Russian steppe behind the Petchenegs and defeated them on the Danube. But no sooner had all these hordes withdrawn into Russia again than the Petchenegs, under pressure from the Kipchaks, invaded Thrace once more in 1088–89, going as far as Ipsala, south of Adrianople, where Alexius had to buy them off. In 1090 the Petchenegs joined with the Seljuks of Asia Minor to attack Constantinople by the valley of the Maritsa, from Adrianople to Ennis, while the Seljuk fleet, mistress of Smyrna, attacked the coasts, and from Nicaea the Seljuk army threatened Nicomedia, Izmit. It was a repetition of the situation at the time of Heraclius and the Avars, but now in both Asia and Europe Byzantium was confronted by Turks, pagan Turks in Europe, Muslim Turks in Asia, united against the empire by ties of kinship. The Petchenegs wintered near Luleborgaz, opposite the Byzantine lines, which had been withdrawn to Chorlu. Once more Alexius Comnenus appealed to the Kipchaks, who, commanded by Tagortak and Maniak, came down into Thrace from Russia and took the Petchenegs in the rear. On April 29, 1091, the combined Byzantine and Kipchak forces crushed the Petcheneg army at Mount Lev Union. It was the decimation of a whole people. The remnants of the Petchenegs, having reformed in Wallachia, made a fresh attempt in the succeeding generation, in 1121, an attempt which was confined to Bulgaria, north of the Balkan Range. But they were surprised and massacred by Emperor John Comnenus in the spring of 1122. The Petchenegs had given place in the Russian steppe to the Ogurs and the Kipchak. The Oghuz, whose Asiatic descendants are now known as Turkmen and who were known to the Arabs as Guz, were in the habit of roving northeast of the Caspian and north of the Aral Sea. A clan of this nation, the Seljuks, embraced Islam and in the 11th century went to seek its fortune in Persia, where it founded the great Turkic Muslim empire of Togrul Beg, Alp Arslan, and Malik Shah. Similarly, in the 11th century, another Oghuz clan, pagan in this case, the Uzoi of Byzantine historians, overthrew Petcheneg supremacy in the Russian steppe. Russian chronicles first mention these Oghuz, under the simple name of Turks, in 1054, at the same time as the appearance of the Polovtsi or Kipchaks. Byzantine historians report that in 1065, during the reign of the Byzantine Emperor Constantine Dukas, these Uzoi crossed the Danube to the number of 600,000, and devastated the Balkan Peninsula as far as Thessalonica and northern Greece, but that soon afterward they were annihilated by the Petchenegs and the Bulgars. The last of the Oghuz bands who had passed west of the Volga were finally subjugated, eliminated, or assimilated by the Kipchaks. The people known in Turkic as Kipchaks were the same as the Polovtsi of the Russians, the Komonoi of the Byzantines, the Kumani, Cumans, of the Arab geographer Idrisi, and the Kuan, Kaun, of the Hungarians. According to Gardisi, they originally formed part of the group of Kemak Turks who lived in Siberia along the middle reaches of the Atish, or perhaps, as Minaski believes, along the Ob. The Kemaks and Oghuz were in any event closely related. Kashgari has remarked that the two differed from the rest of the Turkic nations by the mutation of the initial Y to J. Around the middle of the 11th century, the Kipchaks, splitting off from the bulk of the Kemaks, departed in the direction of Europe. In 1054, the Russian chronicles first note their presence in the steppe north of the Black Sea, as well as that of the Oghuz, whom the Kipchaks pushed and drove ahead. The Kipchaks profited by the Oghuz victory over the Petchenegs and, when the Oghuz were cut to pieces by Byzantines and Bulgars in the course of ill-fated expeditions into the Balkans, 1065 and succeeding years, the Kipchaks remained sole masters of the Russian steppe. In 1120–21, Ibn al-Athi alludes to them as such, and as allies of the Georgians. At about this time, several Mongol clans, closely related to the Khitan and mingling to some extent with the westward migration of the Kara-Khitai, are believed to have come from the Sino-Manchurian borders to the region of the Ural and Volga rivers, there to join the main body of the Kipchaks, among whom they may have assumed the status and function of ruling class. Yet they must very soon have been assimilated, merging as they absorbed the Turkic way of life with the purely Kipchak element. The Kipchaks remained masters of the Russian steppe until the invasion by Genghis Khan's lieutenants in 1222. Then, under Russian influence, certain Kipchak chiefs began to adopt Christianity. Also, the Kipchaks were to bequeath their name posthumously to Mongolian Russia, since the Genghis Khanate realm founded in that territory became known as the Khanate of Kipchak. What should be borne in mind of this summary is the achievement of the Byzantine Empire in resisting, throughout so many centuries, the succession of hordes that beat upon its frontiers. From Attila to the Oghuz, all these unpolished Turks and Mongols represented a far more formidable danger to Christian civilization than the crisis of 1453.